What is Project 2025? It was developed by the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank. It has 4 areas: policy, personnel, training, and a playbook for the first 180 days to be written later.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Next 2.0 on WQLN PBS NPR. Next is produced by the Public's Voice Media, and I'm your host, Marcus Atkinson. If you need to know more about Next 2.0, you can go to Facebook and like the page. You can also follow us on Instagram at Next 2.0 Erie, and there you can keep up with upcoming show promos, events, and clips about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Thank you so much for tuning in. What you just listened to was a brief synopsis of something called Project 2025. And in case you've been living under a rock, this is a hotly contested document, 922 pages, I believe, document that outlines next steps in the event that there is a Republican president elected to office. And when I say in the event, it is specifically designed with the intent of activating Donald J. Trump's next presidency. And so what is the big deal about this Project 2025? I want to first start by saying this. If you can think about the unprecedented times that we're in right now, and I know you've heard it a lot on a lot of different channels, but I really want you to think about this. I've often asked the question, when you are in history, when it is being written in the present moment and you're in it, do you know it? And we're in it, I truly believe. If you think about the fall of affirmative action, we probably thought we'd never see that, and we did. If you think about the fall of Roe v. Wade, we probably thought we would never see that. And we did. You look at the most recent ruling by the Supreme Court, which gives the presidency unprecedented immunity from their actions while they are president, as long as it is, and I quote, an official act, something that many people fear will empower the wrong type of president. That's unprecedented. If you look at January 6th, no one ever envisioned or imagined. If I took you back several years and said a group of people would storm the Capitol while Congress is in session, call for the beheading or the hanging of the vice president, and someone would be murdered, they would attack the Capitol Police, you would probably never believe me. And yet, in our lifetime, we watched all of that unfold. We watched the assassination attempt on a former president, that being Donald J. Trump. We haven't seen an assassination attempt in this country since March 30th, 1981, when John Hinckley Jr. tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan. And yet, here we are. So when you hear Project 2025 and people are talking about how much they are concerned as to whether or not this thing can actually come to fruition, because understand that this 900+ page document took millions of dollars and dozens upon dozens of people to produce. This is not something that was done on a whim. This was not something that somebody sketched up on a notepad in somebody's basement and ran it to the powers of be and said, hey, what do you think of this? This was a concerted effort to come up with a plan, a comprehensive plan to change the landscape of this country as we know it. Should that concern us as citizens? The prevailing thought is, yeah, it should. And so I want to look at a couple of things. We had a successful town hall podcast recording not too long ago, and you heard our version of it or our side of it, but we had some audio issues and you really didn't hear the audience. We want to make sure that we get that corrected before we do the next one, because the next town hall discussion will be on Project 2025, and certainly the document is much too large for me to take on individually. My co-hosts Chuck Camarata and Mark Blunt, along with a couple other friends of the show, will take on segments of this, and we will dig into it as much as humanly possible in a reasonable amount of time, because it could easily be a 4 or 5 hour show if you aren't careful. But we want to give a synopsis and a critique of this document to the best of our ability in the public forum. So stay tuned for that. Now, I want to play a clip from Donald J. Trump. And this is his response when it comes to Project 2025. First, there's a lead in from a White House correspondent from PBS. Then it goes into several clips to corroborate what this correspondent is saying. Listen to this.
Former President Donald Trump has distanced himself from Project 2025, the handbook for a new conservative government written by several right-wing think tanks. The presumptive Republican nominee said on Truth Social that he knows, quote, nothing about Project 2025 and has no idea who's behind it.
Like some on the right severe right, came up with this Project 25, and I don't even know. I mean, some of them I know who they are, but they're very, very conservative. He's involved in Project, and then they read some of the things, and they are extreme. I mean, they're seriously extreme. But I don't know anything about it. I don't want to know anything about it.
They wrote a document that many of the points are fine. Many of the points are absolutely ridiculous. I have nothing to do with the document. I've never seen the document. I've seen certain things that are said in it.
All right, and so that is former President Trump in active denial. Any chance and opportunity he gets in terms of his knowledge of Project 2025, let alone his ties to Project 2025. Vice President Kamala Harris said something at a rally, and I thought it was so poignant, and I feel the same way. She said, can you believe that they committed this plan to paper? And I'll add to that, because she didn't say this. Can you believe that they committed this plan to paper pre-election? I don't know if it was the hubris that they assumed that Joe Biden was easy to beat. I don't know if they just thought the power of MAGA was just that strong. Whatever the impetus was, the fact that they created this document and released it to the public leading into an election showed a very strong confidence that overwhelmingly America would get on board with this thing. But now it is concerning to not just the average citizen, but it is also very concerning to fellow Republicans, because as you know, the MAGA movement has taken over the Republican Party. I was just speaking to a conservative friend of mine before, and I've told you in the past that I have in the past been a very proud Republican. Now I'm stuck with just the crat because the Republican part has been all discombobulated. When I was speaking to this conservative, I said, wow, I'm amazed that the party of Reagan has allowed themselves to be made over in such a way that it is so extreme to the right that you couldn't even recognize it today. I mean, some of the core values that they espoused in the past are no longer. When you look at the candidate that they put forth and all of the things in his orbit, you start to understand that this is not the same party. But now there's a part of Donald J. Trump that understands that this is a damaging document to his reelection, especially now with the pivot of the Democratic Party and the rise of Vice President Kamala Harris as the presumptive nominee as we move into the convention this coming week. And so he's now trying to distance himself. There's a part of him that understands fully that there's a certain segment of the population that has a taste for this. Perhaps we move too swiftly, and I want to see if we can sneak this through now. Now, he's claiming he doesn't know a thing about this. There's been a lot of information floating around in cyberspace that there are ties to Donald J. Trump from the writing of Project 2025. Let me play you a clip that supports that thought.
Despite Donald Trump's denials that he knows who these people are, he is deeply connected to key authors of Project 2025, which include Paul Dans, Roger Severino, Ken Cuccinelli, Christopher Miller, and Russ Vought. All of these people served in Trump's administration, as well as Stephen Miller. He is someone who was a top advisor to President Trump when he was in the White House and still remains a top advisor to Trump. And he's tried to distance himself as well from Project 2025. But the facts are, Amna, that his group, America First Legal, is a part of Project 2025's advisory board.
And so there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the fact that there is an intentional attempt to distance himself from this document. That alone should make you second guess the content of this document, which again is why we're doing a town hall on this, because we feel a responsibility to keep you informed about these type of things. I read a USA Today article, and it pointed out the number of Republican politicians that are now throwing their hat into the arena in support of Vice President Harris for her presidential bid. And among those, and before I say this or quote this article, remember that the Heritage Foundation is the organization that concocted this Project 2025 document. The Heritage Foundation. And one of the people that it talks about in this article is the former defense secretary under Trump, Mark Esper. He was also once the chief of staff at Heritage, same organization that penned this document. He has come out publicly against Donald J. Trump, and he has been decrying this document every opportunity that he gets. Obviously, a lot of people have heard of Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney has been against not just the rise of Trump, but now especially with this, she's looking at the possibilities of America being changed completely. The article goes on to say former Representative Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, a longtime vocal Republican critic of Trump, is among the prominent names on this list. Former Trump White House officials Stephanie Grisham and Olivia Troy have also joined the GOP grassroots program. Grisham served multiple roles in the Trump administration, mostly in communications, the most recent being chief of staff to First Lady Melania Trump. Now, she resigned just hours after the January 6, 2021 riot. Troy served as the Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Advisor to then Vice President Mike Pence and on the White House Coronavirus Task Force before resigning in August 2020 and endorsing Biden's 2020 presidential campaign. And this article goes on and just breaks down all of these individuals. I'll give you some of the names. Other prominent figures in the Republicans for Harris program include former U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel, former U.S. Secretary of Transportation Ray LaHood, former U.S. Treasurer Rosario Marin, former GOP State Chair and State Senator Chris Vance of Washington, Reed Howard of Young Republicans for Harris, former Republican National Committee Delegate Rena Shaw, Jennifer Horn, former New Hampshire Republican Party Chair. And then it goes on to GOP Congress members who endorse Harris. Those names include Rod Chandler of Washington, Tom Coleman of Missouri, Dave Emery of Maine, Wayne Gilchrist of Maryland, Jim Greenwood of Pennsylvania, John LeBoutillier of New York, Susan Molinari of New York, Jack Quinn of New York, Denver Riggleman of Virginia, Claudine Schneider of Rhode Island, Christopher Shades of Connecticut, Peter Smith of Vermont, Alan Steelman of Texas, David Trout of Michigan, and Joe Walsh of Illinois. A quite lengthy list of Republicans that are in support of Vice President Harris and her presidential bid. Now, is it because they believe in the Democratic ideology? Of course not. What these Republicans are thinking and feeling is that if you change the entire landscape of the political system, according to the ideology of Donald J. Trump, according to the ideology espoused in this 2025 document, then politics as we know it will be no more. The country as we know it would, in theory, be no more. And they view that as an existential threat. And so rather than putting their support behind that or sitting it out and just saying, I'm going to cross my arms and not have anything to do with this, they have actively decided we have to support this candidate so that we can reset the political system. Now, that's pretty powerful. Now, is there really a threat to the political system itself, you're probably wondering? Well, when you read Project 2025, you start to understand very quickly that it is attacking and taking aim at our checks and balances system. And so a little bit of politics 101 for the new jack that may be listening, for the novice that may be listening. You've got these three simple branches of government. They all were divided in such a way so that no one particular branch could get beside themselves, seize too much power, and put us in a precarious position as a nation. The framers of the U.S. Constitution divided the powers and responsibilities of this new government into three branches. The legislative branch, which is composed primarily of the U.S. Congress, responsible for making the country's laws. Members of the two houses of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, are elected by the citizens of the United States. I know this is rudimentary, but I feel like we need to go through this because this is what's being challenged right now. The executive branch. The executive branch is one of those three primary agents of the U.S. government, alongside of the legislative and the judicial branches. It is responsible for carrying out and executing the nation's laws. The President of the United States is the chief of this branch, which also includes the Vice President, the rest of the President's cabinets, 15 executive departments, and numerous federal agencies, many of which they want to get rid of in Project 2025. Keep that in mind. This includes boards, commissions, and committees. Lastly, the judicial branch, which has been under intense scrutiny in these last couple of days, last couple of months, actually, since Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, it's been under intense scrutiny, but I digress. This branch of the government is the system of federal courts and judges that interprets laws made by the legislative branch and enforced by the executive branch. At the top of the judicial branch are the 9 justices of the Supreme Court, the highest court in the United States. Now, of course, Supreme Court justice reform is at the top of President Biden's list. I'm quite positive that Vice President Harris, if elected, will pick that mantle up because we have seen a shift in societal policy based in large part on how the bench is not just deciding, but legislating in some ways. And so this is what's so concerning to people. I want to recap these three branches and I want us to think through this. This is what we want to talk about at the town hall. The legislative branch, we talked about the Congress. Right now, there is a thin majority for the Republican Party. Now, there are they went through a phase of people retiring from the Republican Party. They've had special elections, and now you've got a lot of seats right now that are hotly contested as well. Can they protect that majority, that thin majority? Can the Democrats overtake that? This is something that's really at issue right now. But as of right now, there is a thin majority. All right, you look at the executive branch, you go back to the president. If this president gets back in, if this former president gets back in and he decides to enact all of the things in this document, then this becomes very interesting in a very negative way. And then you've got the judicial branch. And we've already had stories. We talked about January 6, 2021, and the ties of Clarence Thomas's wife, Jenny Thomas, to that particular event. Her actions laid bare the biased thoughts and motives of this particular Supreme Court justice. You look at Justice Alito. They talked about the flags that were flying at both of his properties. Both were sympathetic to the MAGA movement. And then you look at all the Supreme Court justices that were appointed by Donald J. Trump. And it gave way to all of the things that we talked about in the beginning of the show that we thought we would never, ever see in terms of affirmative action, Roe v. Wade, and things along those lines. This is what scares people. But now the groundwork for Project 2025 to come to fruition has already been laid.
The president of the Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts, praised that Supreme Court ruling, calling it vital, and said that it was part of a wider conservative reawakening. Ultimately, the Supreme Court decision could help any future president justify getting rid of longstanding independence of the Justice Department or other agencies that are known to be independent, that it could allow them to justify totally doing away with that.
More reasons as to why we're doing a town hall on Project 2025. I went to factcheck.org and it breaks down what this plan says for each and every state in the union. And I pulled Pennsylvania's, and they talked about all of these different areas and how it will affect Pennsylvania. And I extracted that. I want to read you a few of those. I'm looking forward to taking a deep dive into this as we get into this public forum. But a couple of things for you to keep in mind by way of taxes first. Project 2025 shifts the tax burden from the wealthy onto the middle class. Under the plan, the typical family of four in Pennsylvania would see a tax increase of $3,167 per year, while 45,000 households in America reporting more than $10 million in income would see an average annual tax cut of $1.5 million. Social Security. Project 2025 authors have endorsed and supported plans to cut Social Security by raising the retirement age for roughly 70% of Pennsylvania residents, which is 9,137,232 people. Their ideas are reflected in the two most recent Republican Study Committee budget proposals, which propose increasing the Social Security retirement age from 67 to 69. Doing so would cut benefits by $4,100 to $8,900 after just 1 year, depending on when one claims Social Security. A median wage retiree would lose $46,000 to $100,000 over 10 years. Healthcare, Project 2025 proposes imposing limits or lifetime caps on Medicaid benefits. In Pennsylvania, 37,100 Medicaid enrollees would be at risk of losing coverage because they are low income and lack access to alternative affordable coverage. Abortion rights and contraception. Project 2025 eliminates some emergency contraceptive medications from free preventative care requirements, meaning 1,890,000 women in Pennsylvania would lose guaranteed access to free emergency contraception. The plan instructs the U.S. Department of Justice to misapply the Comstock Act, a pair of laws from 1873 and 1909, to criminalize the mailing of medication abortion. Doing so would result in an effective abortion ban nationwide, even in states where abortion is legal. Child care, Project 2025 eliminates Head Start, which provides access to no-cost child care, among other services, for 34,080 low-income children in Pennsylvania. Eliminating Head Start would wipe out a critical supply of child care in rural and other underserved communities that already face a lack of child care slot student loans. This plan replaces income-driven payment IDR plans with a one-size-fits-all program that would increase payments for all borrowers enrolled in existing IDR plans, including the Biden-Harris administration Saving on a Valuable Education Plan, the SAVE plan. Under Project 2025, 289,800 borrowers in Pennsylvania enrolled in SAVE would pay $2,700 to $4,100 more in each year. And lastly, public education. This plan eliminates the U.S. Department of Education, including Title I, which provides funds to ensure schools serving low-income students have additional resources to deliver a high-quality education beyond that which can be supported by local property tax revenue. Ending Title I would lead to the loss of 6,943 teaching positions, which serve 92,341 students in the state of Pennsylvania. And so that is just a snapshot of what it looks like for PA in the event that this document takes hold and is enacted. All right, so we need to stay connected to Next 2.0. We encourage you to do that. We will be announcing soon when that town hall will be. And once we do that, we'll post it to Facebook. We'll post it to Instagram. We certainly want people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all political ideologies, all religious ideologies. Why do I say religious? Because there are strong Christian conservatism roots in this document. When you start to read it, we talk about Christian nationalism. This document is the culmination of all of the Christian nationalist philosophy that you've heard in the past few years. And so we certainly want to make sure that all of these different denominations, if possible, are represented so we can have a holistic and a robust conversation. But that's going to do it for us today. That's it for our show. Tune in next time for more discussion and analysis with local and national guests. Remember that Next 2.0 streams on Fridays on all major podcast platforms, wherever you get your podcasts at. And it also streams on the fourth Sunday of the month on WQLN PBS NPR at 91.3 FM on the radio. A new feature, if you want to leave a message, comment, or suggestion for the show, you can call the Next hotline at 814-240-8816. Lend your voice to the conversation. We look forward to hearing from you. I'm Marcus Atkinson. Come and join us again so that you can hear about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Peace.